Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Taylor and today I'm going to be teaching you how to make this granny square sweater. So this is a really easy beginner friendly pattern. We're going to be learning how to, make a granny square. This pattern is just 2 big granny squares with, some granny stitch sleeves. I plan on wearing this Halloween season as either like a killer clown costume or definitely to wear to a scary movie or something. I definitely need to be under a black light in something like this. The yarn that I'm going to be using today is the Red Heart Super Saver stripes in the colorway Bright Stripe. And we are going to be using a 6mm crochet hook. This is the one that I like to use from Oh Fire Co. And then you still will need, scissors, stitch markers, darning needles. I also recommend having a measuring tape on hand because we're going to be measuring out the neck hole and, like sleeve depth here. So if that sounds good to you, let's hop right in. Don't forget to save this video to your playlist so you can come back to it later, and subscribe to the channel for more fun tutorials like this. Okay, so to get started, you're going to start with a magic loop, pull up, and then chain 2, 1, 2, and then you're going to double crochet 2, chain 2, double crochet 2 or 3, double crochet 3, and then chain 2, double crochet another 3, chain 2, and then double crochet 3 again, and then chain 2, and then at this point pull your magic circle closed, and then slip stitch into the chain 2 there. All right, so that is the beginning of your granny square. So to keep going, you're just going to chain 2 and then double crochet 2 more in that same spot. At the start of a skein, so it's not gliding out the way it should. And then you're just going to, you're not going to chain, you're just going to go to the next spot and double crochet 3, chain 2, double crochet 3, skip over, double crochet 3, chain 2, double crochet 3, skip over, double crochet 3, chain 2, double crochet 3, skip, and then double crochet 3, chain 2, and then slip stitch into that chain 2 space from the beginning. And so you'll notice I don't chain in between each cluster. So we're going to chain 2 again and just keep going. And I don't turn with my granny squares. So we're just going to keep going here. And then you're just going to slip stitch into that chain 2, and then you will just keep going. So this is just kind of how you start the granny square. To make this garment, we're going to be making 2 large granny squares. So make this as big as you want. We're going to check in a few more times, and we'll be doing that twice before we seam it together. So I will check back with you in a little bit. Okay, so this is the first panel of the sweater here. So I'm going for more of an oversized look. Sometimes it's kind of hard with a square to try and, because you know, we as humans are not square shaped, we're rectangle shaped. So here's what I got going on. And so this is, you know, up to my shoulders, and then goes to, I think, the tops of my thighs, which might, yeah, it's hard to tell right now. But so now I'm just going to replicate this same thing, make another panel, and then we'll come back and seam them together. So I have my 2 panels here. I made them both 20 like rows big, essentially. And so now we're going to seam up the sides for the armholes and like the neck hole and stuff. So let's get into it. So for this next part, you are gonna want like a tape measure just to, I don't know, measure out where you want your holes to be and like how big you want them to be. So for the last paneled garment I made the neck hole around 7 inches, like big, and that was really nice when I was doing more of a collar look. But I think for this one I'm gonna do 8, and so that'll be, because it's going to come right up here. We're not really doing any sort of like shaping around the neck for this one. It's literally just the 2 squares. So I'm gonna do 8 for this one. And then also when you do your arm, measure from like kind of the top of your shoulder to wherever your arm ends. And for me, that ends up also being around 8 inches. So I'll show you when we, you know, are seaming the panels together how I like to do that. But that is one thing to kind of like keep in mind, is that you do want one of these, and just to measure out a little bit. So here I have my 2 panels. Make sure that you are going to be seaming where the garment would be inside out. So like what I have is my 2 right sides here, and we're going to be seaming on the wrong side. So I'm going to try and figure out where the middle is here. I'm trying to like line up my clusters. So we have like 8 inches here. Okay, so where I put my stitch markers here is where I'm going to end like my slip stitches. So to slip stitch this, we gotta get real low here. I'm just going to make my slip knot with enough end to weave in. And I'm gonna start on this side. So you just insert into your 2 ends here. And I want everyone in the comments to be so proud of me. I wove in the ends on these before I started seaming them together. Then you just start slip stitching. And this garment is going to be like so nice. It'd be a really great like beginner garment if you've never made a sweater before, because I know that people say like don't start with granny squares. I didn't start with granny squares, but I will say my first crochet piece was a blanket. I made a few scarves, but like my first big project was a blanket. I didn't make garments for a long time. I was like actually very scared of making garments. So, you know, it just is what it is. But yeah, so you're just gonna slip stitch up until you find that stitch marker here. And so I know that it's not always like completely accurate with where, you know, the stitch marker ends up. That's like fine with me. I'm very much of the like good enough crafting club, because I don't believe that perfection can be achieved. And don't get me wrong, that's something that like taken me a long time to learn. But yeah, so I have the first part seamed up here, and we're gonna change the angle and I will show you how to slip stitch too. Okay, so we have where we are slip stitching to. So we're going to take our yarn, make a slip knot here, insert our hook, and then we're going to pinch these two ends together, insert our hook. And the way you slip stitch is just yarn over, pull through, and then pull through that slip knot you had. So we're just going to continue doing that until the stitch marker. And so see how it didn't like completely line up? That is like fine with me. So I'm just going to take that out there. And then to tie off, I'm just going to chain one and then cut my yarn with enough to weave in. And that's how you seam up your shoulders. At this point, I do recommend at least like trying it on, making sure that your head can fit through it. You want to make sure that it's not too big, not too small. This is pretty much where I would want it to be. We are going to go back through and single crochet as like a little, you know, it's just something to kind of clean it up a little bit, but we're going to do that at the end. So right now we are going to seam up our sides here. Oh, it's so bright. It's so vibrant. I love it. Okay, so at this point we need to seam up our sides so that, you know, we can have armholes. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your, you know, tape measure, your sewing measuring tape, whatever this is called to you, you know, and you're just going to, you know, measure out that measurement we took of our arm. So for me, that was 8 inches. So that is about right here. So I'm just going to pinch there and insert a stitch marker. And then I'm going to do that on the other side here. Got my stitch marker. And I will try and like match these up at the end as well. You know, we do everything as close as possible, but remember that we are just human and we do make mistakes and we don't, you know, nothing is ever 100% symmetrical, and that's okay. So just like before, I'm gonna slip stitch these seams. So I want to start at the bottom here and seam up to the stitch marker. You can, you know, start at the stitch marker and seam down to the bottom. It's really all about, you know, your preferences. I find that I have a better time lining things up when I do it from the bottom to the stitch marker. But that's just me. You gotta do whatever you want to do. So I'm just going to take the corners here from that like chain 2 space. I really like to keep those two together so that I have a good starting spot. I'm going to move this so that I can comfortably, you know, slip stitch it together. And take my hook and my yarn, slip knot with enough end to weave in. And then I always insert at the corners because I think that's a good starting spot. Insert, slip stitch, and then slip stitch up to that stitch marker. Okay, so now I'm going to be teaching you how to do the sleeve here. Got a little cat hair. And basically what you're just going to do is put a granny cluster into all of the spaces that you can see on your armhole here. So let's just get started. So slip knot, insert your hook. To attach the yarn, I always do a single crochet, and I'm just going to stick it in here in the seam so that our seam is going to be kind of where our armpit is. So I'm just going to single crochet, and then I'm going to chain 2. Then I'm going to put 2 more double crochet into that space. Then I'm just going to do another cluster into the next space. And the next one. I don't do any chain ones between my granny clusters. That's just the way that I like to do it. You know, in terms of granny squares, I think that they're pretty personal to every crocheter. So whatever way is best for you, just, you know, do that. So we're just going to keep going along here, inserting 1 into each of the spaces. So I found that putting a cluster into each of the open spaces that we see does make a sleeve that is big enough for my arm, and it doesn't, you know, make it smaller. Sometimes when I have done granny clusters kind of branching out from, you know, our main panel piece, sometimes it can get a little smaller and like look a little wonky. I found that this was like the best way to do it for me. So as you can see, we're coming up on a seam here. You're going to put 1 cluster in here and 1 cluster in the next one. So just, you know, 1, 2, then we're on to the next panel. 1, 2, and 3. And then you're just on to your other panel. And so I do recommend doing your first sleeve and then just kind of measuring and trying on as you go to see what sleeve length is most comfortable for you. So I did my other sleeve. I haven't counted the rows yet, but once I do, then I will know, and I'm just going to mirror it onto this sleeve. And so we are back at the beginning, and as you can see, we inserted into this space here. I know that it's like kind of wonky, but you're going to put a granny cluster into this space right here. And for this pattern specifically, we are not going to be turning our work. So I put my last granny cluster there. We're going to slip stitch into that first chain 2 that we did. Then we're going to chain 2, and then we're just going to insert 2 more double crochet into that space right there. Instead of turning our work, we are just going to keep going around and around in a like tubular structure. So for as long as your sleeve needs to be, just keep going around and around. Remember, we are not turning our work. So you're going to put a granny cluster into each space and then slip stitch into this chain 2 at the end, and then just keep going. So I'm gonna meet you back at the end for, the end of the sleeve. Okay, so I did all of my sleeve rows. Well, just this one last granny cluster to do. My sleeve row count ended up being 27. And so I'm going to slip stitch into the chain 2 there. Then I'm going to chain 1, and just as like a finishing touch, I'm going to single crochet around the entire sleeve. So first I'm going to single crochet into that chain 2 space where we just slip stitched, and then into each of the stitches around the sleeve. All right, and as you can see, we're already back at the beginning. So what you're going to do is you're going to slip stitch into that first crochet, or that first single crochet, chain 1, and then cut off with enough yarn to weave in at the ends. So the last few things that we're actually going to do on this sweater is we're going to single crochet around the neck hole and the bottom here. So you're going to start with slip knot, put it on your hook, and then you can really insert anywhere here. It doesn't really matter too much. I'm just gonna pick this stitch here, and I'm going to single crochet it on, and I'm going to crochet over this first end here. This just helps give it a little bit of a polished look at the end. And then I always like to kind of like pull and stretch this kind of end here to figure out how long I want to, you know, crochet over it before snipping off the excess. Just, you know, for my own peace of mind so that it doesn't, you know, poke out or anything. All right, and as you can see, we're coming up on our seam here, and I don't want this to end up being any smaller. So what I'm going to do is put one single crochet in here where there is, you know, a slip stitch, and then one into the next one where there also is a slip stitch, and then I'm just going to keep going. All right, and just like before, I'm going to put one into this stitch and then one into this next one. And then the last stitch, and then I'm just going to slip stitch into that first single crochet, chain one, and then cut off with enough to weave in the end. Okay, and then the last thing we're going to do is a single crochet border on the bottom of our sweater. So take your slip knot onto the hook, and then you're just going to pick a random stitch. Make sure that when you're doing this, you're single crocheting on the right side of your garment here. So if you look at these crochet stitches, you can see the loops here. That's the right side, and then the wrong side kind of looks like knots in the back. So you want to single crochet on this side because those single crochets will be facing outward, so that'll be the right side facing you. Little cat hair. Every project I have just has some extra love in it, a little piece of brew. So yeah, you're just going to pick a stitch and single crochet into it. Make sure to crochet over that tail if you would like. I do it just because I then have less ends to weave in. And we're just going to single crochet around. So the ends here where the chain 2s are a little bit unique. If I were to just put one in there, it would kind of bunch up the bottom here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 2 single crochets into each chain 2 space here. So 2 on this side, and then we have the seam here, and then we're going to put 2 more on this next side. And then we're going to start in on the clusters again. See how that is? And so then you're just going to, you know, go all the way around, do the same thing on your other end here, and I will meet you back right here. Okay, we are coming up on the end here, so just a few last single crochets here. Last one, and then we're just going to slip stitch into the first one, chain 1, and then cut our yarn with enough to weave in the end. All right, so now go weave in your ends and your sweater is finished. It's done. Thank you so much for watching this video today. Don't forget to give this video a like, save it to your playlist for later. Honestly, I'm going to wear this to a haunted house, or I've also been thinking this could be like my Halloween costume this year. I purchased a pattern for a little like jester hat. I could be like a killer clown or something. But this is just so fun. I love how bright and vibrant it is. I think that it is so good for spooky season. So yeah, I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. Let me know down in the comments below what colorway you would use to make a sweater like this. Definitely a very versatile pattern, super easy. Again, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.